Mr. Bazan, 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and Minister and officials. Welcome you to the committee today in our study. Minister, in your procurement program, we know that a National Defense employee, David Yo, was also running a company called Dalian, and under the Arrive Can scam, this company got $7.9 million. Now, National Defense fired David Yo. What are you doing to recoup that money that Dalian received? $7.9 million as part of the Arrive scam.
So thank you, Mr. Bazan. And let me point to another number when you point to defense procurement. It's less than 1%. That's what the former government invested in defense spending.
If you compare apples to apples, Minister, the parliament budget or the parliamentary library has just found out that actual spending, apples to apples, actual spending on national defense is at 0.95% this year. So you guys are below 1%. It's only with creative accounting that you get up over that when you add in veterans' pensions and Coast Guard and global affairs. So let's just move on for that, because I don't think that you guys have a leg to stand on. If you're not going to answer the question on recouping taxpayers' money from a scam like Dalian and Arrive Can app, let's just go on to a question I asked last year. We were talking about getting the shoulder-launched missiles for our troops in Latvia, and I asked if there had been any live-fire exercises and tests of and a shoot-off between the different systems that are out there, and D&D confirmed that there wasn't. Now we're hearing that the Spike LR2 system is having problems, and they're not as accurate as expected. So I'm asking is why weren't the options tested before we actually procured a system that doesn't work to the expectations of our armed forces?
So two things again, less than 1%. I know you don't like to hear that.
You're less than 1% too. True. Come on, let's just move on.
But the second thing is if you want to hear in more detail operational matters for D&D, I'm sure Minister Blair will be very pleased to come to you. I expect this meeting to center around the procurement activities that we need to do to support the armed forces. Obviously, these procurement activities are supportive of the needs of the armed forces, but also supportive of a more resilient and more competitive defense industry in Canada. We believe that when we invest in our industry, we also invest in our armed forces and support other allied countries at the same time.
So you have to fix it, because as we know with the Spike LR2 system, it hasn't met expectations, and our troops are wondering why we didn't do the proper testing and procurement in that process. To move on, now we have the defense industry that employs all sorts of different types of people, and you signed a number of certificates of exemption from registration under the Controlled Goods Regulation, which is granted to citizens of Russia, the People's Republic of China, and Iran. And this is with industries that are developing sensitive military technologies. Do you believe it's a national security risk to allow foreign nationals access to those military sensitive technologies?
Well, first you spoke about Russia, and I think it's important to point to things that, unfortunately, I mean, you may not have agreed with that, James, that things that your party did in the House of Commons, which was to oppose every measure we put into place to support Ukraine in its war against the unjustified battle.
Ukraine, that's why. Like if he politics, Mr. Chair, let's actually have him answer the questions I'm asking.
It works better when you don't talk over each other. And whether the questions you are asking and the answers that he is giving, you're not able to direct. He's not able to direct your questions, and you're not able to direct his answers. So I'm going to turn to the minister and ask him in as short a time as possible to respond to Mr. Bazan's questions in the 2 minutes that he has left.
Yes, well, you did correctly speak to how we defend Ukraine against Russia, and that's exactly what we have done until now. Unfortunately, this is teamwork. No, we need to be every party in the House need to be aligned in supporting Ukraine against Russia, and unfortunately, this is not what we have seen recently, including on the free trade accord.
supporting Ukraine, then let's make sure Russia doesn't get access to our military secrets. Since 2016, PSPC, as minister, has signed off on 190 citizens of China, 22 Russian citizens, and 4 citizens of the Iranian regime who are international students, temporary foreign workers, or visitors to Canada. And that's gave them access to military technology like jet engines, diagrams, blueprints, electronic countermeasures equipment, missile technology. You know, Section 5504 strategic goods is including, but not limited to, global navigation systems, things like that. So why would we allow our adversaries to actually enter into any defense industry, and you allowed it by giving those industries permission to have 199 citizens of the People's Republic of China, 22 Russians, and 4 Iranians access to our military defense industry?
I'm sorry, MP Bezin, I don't accept the premises of your various questions. You're stating a number of facts which are inaccurate. It may be because you have been misbriefed or didn't have the opportunities to get the proper security clearance that you would need to know and understand those information. But what I would
I've actually asked for security clearance, and of course the government is saying, you don't need to know, Bazan, so I'm not going to get a security clearance.
Respond to your question.
Now, talking about the equipment that matters so much, and I think you're correct to point to that. Now, with the announcement we made in Budget 2024, we are going to head to the 2% NATO target that is so important to Canada. This being said, and we know you don't like to hear that, but we were investing less than 1% of our GDP in defense spending prior to us coming into power. We've increased that to 1.4% now. It's going to go to 1.8% in 2028 and then ahead to 2% by 2032. These are tangible things that we need to do to support our military.
Okay, we're going to have to read the enthusiastic next round. And Mr. Stewart, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here today. I just want to get one thing on the record here. What I have here is an answer from Charles Souza, your parliamentary secretary, that shows that there were 199 citizens of China, 22 Russian citizens, 4 citizens of the Iranian regime who are either international students, temporary workers, or visitors, allowing them access to things like blueprints, diagrams, and software on military jet engines, aircraft, FLIR, avionics, missile technology, and electronic countermeasures equipment. We can show that to you later if you like. I want to get that on the record, Chair. I was looking up.
Do you have a copy for the minister by any chance?
We can get one to him.
And they too.
I was researching some procurement initiatives this morning, and it was funny. The first thing that popped up was an ad. Discover the cure for bad service management. And that led me down a little bit of a rabbit hole, and it got me thinking about the procurement times that we have for some of our equipment for military use. Over 7 years to buy tow trucks. That one caught my interest. Over 10 years to buy drones. Meanwhile, we've seen rising threats from China and Russia, which would suggest that these timelines for military procurement should be compressed to weigh against the threats. Now, I understand that in procurement, there's an element of risk management to be, whether it's financial risk management or equipment risk management. But at the moment, the risks seem to be tilted towards those of the soldiers, because they're not soldiers and airmen, and sailors, because they're not getting the equipment they need in a timely manner. Can you explain to me how we can improve our procurement system such that our CAF members can get equipment that their life depends on in a more timely manner?
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Vous avez correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, you correctly pointed to the importance of affiliating our armed forces, but you invested less than 1% in the armed forces before 2015.
levels of investment. And I'll get on the record here as well that the GDP numbers of our government are also been fudged. The DPU put forward numbers that were based on not the government's GDP forecast, but their own, which undershot to show that there was a higher defense spending, 1.76. If you back that back out, it's well below 1.5% in actual fact.
That was basically, it's been 3 minutes of Mr. Stewart's question, so it seems only fair to allocate the balance of the time however you wish to answer the question.
Très bien. Deux choses. On parle.
Two things. We're talking about 2015 spending. In 2015, it was less than 1% of the GDP invested by the Conservatives. Then there's risk management. You're perfectly right. We have to manage risk in a way that guarantees that the forces will have the equipment they need. So we have to accelerate the processes, and that's what we're trying to do, among other things, with the announcement I made last Thursday with Eldred Harris. That was very well received. There will be other announcements very soon about this strategic partnership, and it gives results. There are 200 additional aircraft, 9 in the last 2 years alone, which is more than in very many years preceding that. We're talking about investment in the shipbuilding strategy, dozens of ships, icebreakers that protect our coasts and our seas. So these are significant elements of progress, but can only be done if we have the money necessary to do it.
Thank you. When we had General Leslie here a few weeks ago, he said that in 2023, Canada spent more money on consultants and professional services than it did on the Army, Navy, and Air Force combined. Would you suggest that, or would you agree that this was a misuse of money, and why are these funds not being directed towards our troops?
À nouveau, il faut regarder les chiffres.
Well, once again, you have to look at the figures as they are. It was less than 1% in 2015. We're now at 1.4%. We will approach 1.8% in 2028, and we'll achieve 2% in 2032. So these are very clear figures, and the trend is obvious. While we have this increase in the budget for the forces, we have to make sure that the needs of the armed forces are fulfilled. We have to support Canadian industry, too, in its competitiveness, in order to have a partnership with the U.S. Industry. The example of IcePack for the naval strategy works very well. We can provide Canada with icebreakers that other allied nations also need.
Maybe two more things. The application of the national security exception.
At a time, but those probably are important two things. Madame Gallant, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Germany is considering invoking NATO's Article 5. You won't have our submarines operational for another 13 years if all goes well. In 5 years, our Conservative government got 5 C-17 Globemasters, 17 C-130 Hercs, 15 Chinook helicopters, which had been canceled by the Liberals previously and ended up costing many lives on the ground in Afghanistan, 100 Leopard tanks, modernized drones, modernized Auroras and frigates. So we don't have 13 years. We're on potentially the brink of war. What can you do to speed up the process now so that we can get the equipment in our military's hands that they need right now on the front lines?
Well, two things. First, I have a long list of investments that we've made just in the last few years. I can speak to the Future Fighter Capability Project, the Canadian Multi-Mission Aircraft, the Arctic and Offshore Patrol Ships, the Armored Combat Support Vehicles, the Logistics Vehicle Modernization Project, the Strategic Tanker Transport Capability, the Remotely Piloted Aircraft System, and I could go on and on and go on. But one thing I could summarize in just one number is less than 1%. This is what the Conservative government invested in 2015. We've reached 1.4% and will achieve the 2% NATO target in 2032.
In 2013, or in 2032, the NATO target could be 3%. In fact, they're looking at raising the base, the floor, to 2.5%. So already you're more than a decade behind. Now, over Thanksgiving, I met with several local manufacturers of military kit. I asked how quickly they could ramp up if we needed to. They said U.S. defense contractors had just been there asking them the same questions. So what they told me is that all they need are the contracts. So what volume of artillery shells, ammunition have been put into contracts, missiles, have the contracts actually been signed for? What can you tell me is on order to be ready should the worst happen?
Merci. Donc, à nouveau, moins d'un.
Thank you. Again, less than 1% in 2015. And when it comes to munitions, in the new policy announced a few months ago, we have a budget of about $9.5 million for new production capacity in Canada, not just munitions produced in Canada will be used by the Canadian Forces, but a significant amount will come from Canada because we know that in Quebec, Saint-Augustin, Valleyfield, Repentigny, in Winnipeg, in Magellan, Ontario, Kitchener, other places, there is capacity for munition production that is underused right now and that we will be developing more to protect ourselves against the threats that you've properly identified.
Capacities exist, but they're not going to tool up and get ready until the contracts are in place. We have to be ready for when they need it. You've talked a lot about investments that you've made, but they haven't been delivered, and there's no sign that they're going to be delivered anytime quickly. So we have our troops in Latvia right now. Half their vehicles don't work. They don't have the parts. They don't have the mechanics. They have no air defense. What has been done on the part of your ministry in procuring some air defense that we can get on the ground for Canada, not borrowing off someone else?
Bon, je vais corriger certains faits, là.
Well, let me correct a few facts here. The Canadian defense industry is doing well and going better and better. 81,000 jobs are created in Canada annually with a significant investment that we're making. The second thing is that when you talk about presence in Latvia, it's to defend Ukraine. Unfortunately, I know it's uncomfortable for you to hear, but you voted against all investments that we made to defend Ukraine in the past few months. That's something we find regretful, but that's the reality.
Much. In response to my last question, I guess the answer is that there are no contracts for artillery shells or ammunition underway and in place so that we can get them in good order. So how are you going to provide enough funding and get the equipment necessary, cut through the red tape so that our Cyber Command has the necessary tools and latest technology and can keep up with the bad actors who are constantly attacking our cyber infrastructure from the cyber angle?
Again, I don't know why members do this, but runs a question right up to 3 seconds left. If you can answer in 3 seconds, you're welcome to it, but I'm happy to move on as well.
Less than 1%.
Okay.
Point of Mr. Chair, it is not question period. We don't need the theatrics. We actually need some answers.
Well, yes, point of order. Man, this is a stretch of point of orders. Okay, final 5 minutes if we can.